Hello, everybody. Thanks for having me here. I own a internet company here about 2 miles north of Lansing, and we build telecommunications and fiber networks. We build cell towers. I have a bunch of people who work on cell sites. Um, we own and operate around 900 cell sites presently. Those are typically the newer generation types of cell sites which exist on utility poles or light poles that are approximately 35 to 45 feet in height. Um, I've been through a heck of a lot of training on RF exposure, and also been doing, we've done a fair amount of work on broadcast towers, those big giant towers that everybody knows about that allow us to provide television service and radio service. So the first, kind of give you some background and perspective on this. It was about 1900, uh, almost 120 years ago, that the first artificial human-created radio transmission occurred. And the first radio station in the United States came into operation in 1920. So the industry and the market and science has had around 100 years of workers getting very close to high-powered radio transmission equipment. And to this date, there's no evidence that there's any risk to our workers related to cancer risk, as long as we stay within the acceptable ranges that the FCC has presently defined. And so things like Wi-Fi transmitters or these little guys, which may be on the side of your house, are at such low power ratings in comparison to, for example, the most powerful transmitter in Michigan is the WJR radio station, which is outputting 50,000 watts of transmission power. And so everybody's been exposed, I use that as a colloquial term. Everybody has been receiving radio transmission power from WJR's radio station and all the other dozens and dozens and maybe, I don't know how many radio stations there are. There's got to be over 100 or 150 in Michigan. And there's lots of TV stations as well. CB radios in cars. And really the best place to look to see if there's any substantial risk is the communication workers who work on this infrastructure and are very close to it, far more than likely anybody else. Is anybody in this room a cell tower climber? No. Oh, you are? Okay, great. Well, it's likely people like me or him have been far more exposed to RF frequency ranges during our work time than nearly anybody else has. And at present, worldwide, the workforce and the insurance industries who insure those workers and the unions that represent some of those workers haven't seen substantial or significant increases in cancer risk associated with cellular service. So, on the other hand, one of the main advantages and the strengths of if you are concerned with RF emissions, one of the best things in the cellular business you can do is to distribute and decrease the amount of transmission power, if that's a concern. Because as far as we know, we're not going to wipe out the cellular industry. We're not going to get rid of cars. We're not going to get rid of electricity. And so if the concern is to lower it, one of the best ways to do it is to decrease the power of the transmissions that are coming from these devices. And so much of the deployments that are occurring with 5G are with far lower powered devices than what currently exists on cellular sites. They're a fraction of the energy occurring, typically in the 20-watt range. So in addition to that, the cell phones, which need to return the signal back to those sites, rather than sending it to a large tower that's 5 or 6 miles away or 3 or 4 miles away, that signal only has to go perhaps a quarter mile or a half mile. So the power levels on your phones, as well as the battery utilization on the phones, is dropping substantially. So when we put our small cell systems near my office, we have about 130 people, and we all have cell phones. Our batteries lasted, typically 2 to 3 times longer. That's because the device that we put next to our head, or is sending a far smaller signal when it reaches a small cell site. The reason the industry is deploying these small cell systems is to enable greater connectivity, and one of the main drivers for that is autonomous driving. So to give you hard numbers, in the United States, about 34 to 35,000 people a year are killed in vehicle crashes. And that's a hard number that we know. It's a statistic, and it's a hard, there's no question we know that number of people are dying. When I got my Chevrolet Volt and the option was to get automatic braking, I was like, please give me automatic braking, because, I've never been a great driver, and anything we can have that increases the safety of a guy like me driving is a great technology. And so yes, it sends radio waves up to the car up front in order to detect it. It's got visual detectors. Autonomous driving and the wireless networks that are necessary to support vehicle-to-vehicle communications or vehicle-to-network communications in order to relay all of the data and the geolocation information associated with automobiles is the best way to minimize death, risk, and a heck of a lot of injuries that are documentable and known and have been known for years. My belief is we're probably about 5 to 10 years before autonomous vehicles and a lot of automated driving is likely to be available to the public. And I think it's a wonderful technology, and it'll certainly save a heck of a lot of lives. Whenever we order trucks or machinery, we're always, as soon as we can get the, that technology in our vehicles, but we add it in there. Along with those types of technologies, you hear a lot of deployments with Wi-Fi. And Wi-Fi is being extensively deployed in businesses and in homes. The transmission limitations of conventional Wi-Fi equipment is 250 milliwatts, so 1/4 of a watt. And so to give you an example of, for example, conventional LED light bulbs, we're probably putting out around the same amount of RF energy from a light bulb as you are from your Wi-Fi device in your house. So, and we're all covered and bathed in light bulbs. So, and in the same principle, the same radio receivers, right here in front of your eye, in your eye, in your skull, those are radio wave receivers, receiving the visible light spectrum. So a lot of the, I would encourage everybody to, study the science. That's the key to it. And fundamentally, the biggest things, if you're concerned about this, the biggest things I would suggest to you is to encourage people to invest in science and research, right? Ultimately, that's the key to all of this stuff, right? Humanity, I well realize, what was complicated and unknown 1,000 years ago, a lot of people considered it mysticism or religion or witchcraft, right? Today we have continued to refine science to understand the properties of the universe. And having been in this business a long time, I don't believe the human mind knows all the properties of the universe. I don't believe the human mind knows all the properties of the human biological system or the animal world, right? And so the thing that I would encourage for everybody to do is to encourage greater scientific research and testing and analysis. That's ultimately what is going to lead us to better solutions and answers for the health concerns we have. So with that, I would like to thank you for your time, and if I'm sure we may have some questions and answers later, I would guess. Thank you.